Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. And today we're going to look at how did medieval families cope with brutal winter conditions? This is an age-old question that has fascinated historians for centuries. What was life like in the Middle Ages? How did people survive the long, cold winters? How did they cope with the challenges of everyday life? In this video, and with that said, let's begin. We will take a closer look at the daily lives of medieval families during the winter months and explore how they coped with the harsh weather conditions. We will discuss their clothing, food, shelter, and other factors that helped them survive the winter. In general, houses in the Middle Ages were built from stone or wood and had thatched roofs. In the Middle Ages, people relied on a variety of sources of food to sustain themselves. In the Middle Ages, people believed that exposure to cold temperatures could make them susceptible to illness and disease. As a result, they took steps to keep warm. And with that said, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. We need to gather information from a variety of sources. These sources often provide in-depth analysis and interpretation of the topic based on primary and secondary sources. When using these sources, it's important to evaluate the author's credibility and the quality of their research. Here are some types of resources that can be helpful in answering this question, such as wearing layers of clothing, keeping their homes well insulated, and eating warm meals. Many museums have online collections that include artifacts related to medieval daily life, such as clothing, tools, and artwork. The next step is to evaluate your sources and identify the key themes and patterns that emerge. If you enjoyed it, then please consider becoming a member. The link is provided below. And with that said, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. This will help you to form a strong argumentative or narrative essay on your chosen topic. Remember to cite your sources properly and to use quotations and paraphrases effectively. With careful research and analysis, you'll be able to write a compelling and informative essay on how did medieval families cope with brutal winter conditions. These sources can give us a visual representation of what life was like in the Middle Ages. In addition, some medieval families had access to heating devices such as braziers and small furnaces. Many organizations and institutions have websites that are dedicated to providing accurate and reliable information on the Middle Ages. These sources can be helpful for finding background information and for discovering additional resources. These sources can give us a first-hand account of how people coped with winter conditions and the challenges they faced. These devices were used to provide a source of heat in homes and public buildings. Moreover, medieval people believed that it was important to keep active in order to generate body heat. As a result, they would often engage in activities such as dancing, singing, and storytelling indoors during the winter months. By using a combination of academic sources, primary sources, museum resources, and online sources, you'll be able to get a better understanding of how did medieval families cope with brutal winter conditions. These activities not only helped to keep people warm, but also provided a welcome distraction from the harsh realities of life in the Middle Ages. Finally, medieval families would often spend the winter months indoors. They would stay inside their homes and avoid going outside in the cold weather whenever possible. This allowed them to conserve energy and stay warm. In addition, people in the Middle Ages often celebrated the winter solstice with festivals and gatherings. These events provided an opportunity for people to come together and celebrate the return of the sun, which symbolized the end of the winter and the beginning of spring, including hunting, fishing, gathering wild foods, and of course, farming. By wearing layers of clothing, protecting their homes, eating a nutritious diet, staying active, and celebrating the winter solstice, medieval families were able to survive the harsh weather conditions and maintain their health and well-being. It is important to note that life in the Middle Ages was not easy, and the struggle to survive in the winter months was a constant reality for many people. However, By studying the ways in which medieval families coped with these challenges, we can gain a greater appreciation for their resilience and adaptability in the face of adversity. During the winter months, when fresh food was scarce, people would rely on stored food, such as dried fruits, nuts, and grains. In addition, many families had root cellars where they stored vegetables, such as potatoes and carrots, that could last through the winter. Another important source of food during the winter months was meat. In the Middle Ages, people would often slaughter animals, such as pigs and cattle in the autumn, and then preserve the meat for the winter. This was done through methods such as salting, smoking, and drying. In addition, people would often hunt wild animals during the winter months to supplement their diet. Finally, medieval families would often rely on soups and stews to provide them with the necessary nutrition during the winter months. These dishes were made with a variety of ingredients, including vegetables, meat, and sometimes even blood. By taking advantage of all of these sources of food, medieval families were able to get the nutrients they needed to stay healthy during the brutal winter conditions. These materials were chosen for their durability and insulation properties. In addition, medieval homes often had thick walls and small windows, which helped to keep the cold air out. Some homes even had features such as chimneys and fireplaces, which provided warmth and helped to prevent the buildup of moisture and smoke inside the house. Furthermore, medieval families would take steps to seal up their homes during the winter months. They would often hang rugs or blankets over doorways and windows to keep the drafts out. They might also use materials such as straw or sawdust to fill cracks and gaps in the walls or roof. By taking these steps, medieval families were able to create a more comfortable and safer living environment for themselves during the winter months. Before we get started, if you like videos like this and would like to support, then please consider becoming a patron. The link is provided below. In order to answer this question properly, we need to understand some key points about medieval life. Firstly, the medieval period lasted from around 500 AD to 1500 AD and covered a vast area of Europe, so it's important not to generalize too much. Secondly, during the Middle Ages, most people lived in rural areas and were farmers or laborers working on farms or in small towns. Thirdly, the climate in Europe during the Middle Ages was generally colder than it is today. This was due to a period known as the Little Ice Age, which lasted from the 14th to the 19th century. During this time, temperatures in Europe were several degrees lower than they are now. Finally, it is important to remember that the Middle Ages were a time of great hardship and poverty for most people. Famine, disease, and war were common occurrences, making life difficult for everyone. Despite these challenges, there were many ways in which medieval families coped with the harsh winter conditions. One of the main ways in which medieval families coped with brutal winter conditions was through their clothing. People in the Middle Ages wore heavy, layered clothing to keep warm in the cold weather. The typical medieval peasant would wear a tunic, a long-sleeved shirt, a cloak, and a hood. They would also wear trousers, socks, and wooden shoes. In addition, they would often wear multiple layers of clothing to trap heat between them. Women typically wore dresses made of wool or linen, while men wore tunics and hose. The wealthy could afford more luxurious materials, such as velvet and silk, as well as fur-lined garments. These layers of clothing helped medieval people stay warm and dry in the winter months, and were often passed down through generations. Medieval families also took steps to ensure that their homes were adequately protected from the elements. Food was also an essential part of coping with the harsh winter conditions. Medieval families also took steps to protect themselves from the cold temperatures. In conclusion, medieval families coped with brutal winter conditions through a combination of practical measures and traditional beliefs. If you enjoyed this video, then please consider becoming a member. The link is provided below. To answer the question of how did medieval families cope with brutal winter conditions? Firstly, academic books and articles written by historians are an excellent source of information. Secondly, primary source documents such as letters, diaries, and legal records from the medieval period can provide valuable insights into the daily lives of medieval families. Thirdly, museum websites and archives can be helpful in providing information on medieval life and culture. Fourthly, reputable websites and online resources can provide a wealth of information on the topic. Finally, it is important to use a variety of sources to ensure that you are getting a well-rounded and comprehensive answer to your question. Now that you know where to find the information you need, all right, everyone, that's all for this video.